Hey, everybody. It's time for another session of SOC 100. Woo! Okay, so today we're actually going to start going through the chapters, beginning, of course, with chapter 1. So if you haven't already done so, I would suggest that you go get a hold of a downloaded copy of the first test review in case you want to make any notes on it. Get your sociology text out and turn it to chapter 1. Now, I could pause while you're doing that, but see, you can pause this while you're doing that. Yeah, Maynard. Okay. All right. Are you ready? Here we go. This is all in my big book. Oh, how I've missed you. Oh, sorry. Okay. Chapter 1, Sociological Perspective. Now, throughout this course, I'm going to be always starting off the chapters. In fact, throughout the chapters, I have some pithy quotes from famous people that kind of highlight some of the things that we're talking about, some of the concepts that we're talking about. So we're going to start off with Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, who was he? Now, whenever I ask a question like that, if you actually want to think about it, just pause. I'm going to plow on. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Hey, wasn't he one of the transcendentalists in American literature? That's correct. He existed in the 1830s, 1840s, at the same time as Henry David Thoreau, the other transcendentalist. And he wrote a book one time called The Soul. And it's very mystical. He talked about there's an oversoul, of which all the individual souls are part of. So he had very mystical leanings. Anyway, the quote I want to share with you is, he said, knowledge is the antidote of fear. Honoré de Balzac said, the world belongs to me because I understand it. Okay, who is T.S. Eliot? T.S. Eliot. Give up? Well, he was a British poet and author, and perhaps his most famous work was an extremely extensive poem called The Wasteland. And The Wasteland is filled with so many allegories and allusions. It's very difficult to understand until you penetrate through all of it, but it's a brilliant poem. And perhaps you've heard the ending of it. The famous ending of the poem is, this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. He also wrote something called Four Quartets, and Four Quartets is like the study of sociology. He said, we shall not cease from exploring, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know this place for the first time. Now, why he says that is because a lot of sociology is about is to step back and look at the world objectively. Step out of your subjective life and see if you can look at it in a more objective way. Throughout this course, no extra charge, I'm going to give you, you may recall or not, in the first presentation where I went over the course, I mentioned that there is an explanation of the nature of reality. Now, typically where we've learned that explanation is through perhaps an organized religion or whatever. But, and I know you're wondering, well, what's this got to do with me? Well, see, if you actually had some insight into how life is structured and what it's all about, you might like to live your life more meaningfully. But that, irrelevant consideration aside, what I'm going to share with you throughout this course is not the world according to Maynard, although you will hear that too. But what I'm going to share with you is, I spent a lot of time reading mystical literature ever since the 60s when I got turned on to spirituality. Ever since that time, I've continued to explore it. And what I've noticed in reading 100 different books across different religions, different cultures, is they all begin to say the same thing. And so I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm just saying it's rather compelling that they all say the same thing. Now, this is further cross-referenced by the fact that I've read accounts of people who have achieved enlightenment. And enlightenment is nothing more than recognizing one's union with the Creator, however you imagine the Creator to be. And so all these people who've achieved enlightenment say the exact same things all these mystics and great sages and great gurus have said across time, across cultures, across millennia. They all say the same thing with different cultural veneer. So to me, there's something compelling about that. To me, that may be the explanation to the nature of reality. So I'm going to share it with you. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree, but I do ask that you have an open mind about it. And here's what I'm going to do. I want you to walk this walk with me and listen to what I have to say in terms of what the mystics describe as the nature of reality, which at sometimes will seem like, gosh, that's 180 degrees different than anything I've ever learned. That may well be true. But I'm only asking you to keep an open mind about it. You don't have to agree. What I do ask you to do is to try to understand the logic behind it. I actually teach a course on metaphysics, and I invite the students to do the same thing. And at the end of the course, everybody at least agrees that this explanation of reality is coherent and logical. So take it for what it's worth. And here's what I'm going to do for you. On the last day of class, the last lecture, presentation, on chapter 25, when I'm done, I'm going to go like this and snap my fingers, and you can go right back to the pre-existing beliefs you had before the semester started, and to be good to go. Okay, so this quote is from Werner Erhard, explaining the need to have an open mind about spirituality. He said, true clarity can come only when someone is willing to notice there is something I do not know, the knowing of which could change everything. Wangari Maathai said, you cannot enslave a mind that knows itself. Okay, on to sociology. Sociology is a discipline. Now, when I was in college, one of the many things I didn't pay attention to, which was most things in academia, was Latin and Greek root words. Actually, I had to take a course in Greek, and it didn't go well. In fact, it went horrible. I flunked it and had to take it over the summer with the very person who flunked me, so it was rough. And he was my personal tutor after having flunked me, so not one of my proud academic moments. Anyway, discipline. And so now I think it's more interesting what the Latin and Greek and other root words are of words we commonly use, because it gives you some insight into what the words are really about. So discipline is from the Latin to instruct. So anyone who is instructed is a disciple. So I was thinking about this going, okay, let's think about, you're being instructed by me. That means you are my disciples. And since my name is Maynard, that makes you my nerds. All right, I'll move on. Sociology is a relatively young discipline that developed along with the Industrial Revolution and perceptions of structural causes for problems in the United States. Okay, now this is a fun-filled game we do throughout the course is, when was the Industrial Revolution? I don't mean literally this year, but approximately when. Hint, it began in Europe. Well, the time is 1750. So one of the running gags we have in class is I constantly ask the class, by the way, when was the Industrial Revolution? And initially, everybody in the class says 1750. By about 3 weeks later, it's like 3 people knew it was 1750. But hey, now why is it significant? Well, not only was it the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but when we refer to modern times, the Industrial Revolution, 1750, marks the beginning of modern times. Throughout this course, the text constantly makes references to traditional societies, which is prior to 1750, and then modern societies. Now, having said that, there are still traditional societies today around the world, particularly in low-income countries. But for the most part, most of the world has entered into the modern age. A little bit more about sociology. A course in social ethics, as it was called, was taught at Williams College in 1865. And the first sociology course was taught by William Graham Sumner at Yale University in 1876. Coincidentally, the first student to flunk a SOC course was also in 1876. See, it didn't take long. The student took the course. Yeah, I'll move on. The first formal sociology department was founded at the University of Chicago in 1892. So my point being, sociology is a relatively young discipline compared to, say, physics or astronomy, which go back hundreds of years prior to the start of sociology. Sociology is only one of a family of related social sciences. You have psychology, anthropology. Social work was considered applied sociology for a while. Now it's its own field. It's not an academic discipline. It's a pre-professional major, but it's an offshoot too. As is criminal justice. Criminal justice evolved out of sociology. Okay, the sociological perspective. Now, I'm going to let you know when we're getting close to something you need to know for the exam. So I know you're all like, oh my gosh, is this something? I'll let you know. Don't worry. Sociology is defined in the text as the systematic study of human society. It's not a concrete body of knowledge as much as it is a perspective, a special point of view to understanding social reality. So as I mentioned in the previous presentation, you could take a psych course and you get a psychological perspective on life, or a political science course, again, political science perspective on life. So this is the sociological perspective. One of the keys to sociology is in seeing the general in the particular. The sociological perspective often results in seeing the strange in the familiar. For example, in seeing the strange in the familiar, I used to teach a course at Moravian called Sociology of Sport. And one of the assignments I asked the students, because I would get all the jocks and the jockettes taking the course, was, okay, what would be your favorite sport? Okay, here's what I want you to do. For a major paper, I want you to go out and study that sport. And I want you to go sit in the stands, watch the game, and I want you to pretend that you just landed here from Mars and never saw the sport before in your life and just study it objectively. And students came out with all kinds of insights, things they never noticed before because they were so busy subjectively participating in the game, they never noticed interesting aspects about it. And I remember one student describing football and said, it's rather interesting. It seems to be this battle, territorial battle to move this ball back and forth down the field. And then there's women standing on the sideline, jumping up and down and getting the crowd to yell, all very interesting. Ultimately, a key is to see how society affects us in our everyday lives, how it affects even our personal decision-making and our individual thoughts and actions. And I mentioned this in the previous presentation. That's how profound it is, that we are so socialized, it even governs our individual thoughts and decisions. So we think I'm making this freely chosen thought. Oh, it's already pre-programmed, that it's already shaped. That thought, that decision is already shaped by society. Regarding my lectures in this course, English social critic Samuel Johnson said, "I cannot see that lectures can do so much good as reading the books from which the lectures are taken." Well, good news for you. My lectures are straight out of the book. One-stop shopping. As society affects us individually, so it is important for us to understand how U.S. society is affected by our position in the larger world system. Sometimes I have no clue who said this, so then I'll say it's an old saying or it's anonymous. Here's an old saying: "The world is a book, and those who study just their own society read but one page." Peter Berger, a sociologist I quote often, said, "One can be an excellent physicist without ever stepping outside of one's society." I know this is not true for a sociologist. Well, the fact that the whole world is interconnected is obvious in terms of the economy, communications, travel. More evidence of ties with the US and the rest of the world. Many rock stars sell more records abroad than they do in the United States. A great example was Michael Jackson. You still remember Michael Jackson? Michael Jackson, did some curious things. He had that zoo and, anyway, one time he was caught holding his son outside the window of an apartment, 3, 4 stories up, hanging by his arm. So maybe his records didn't sell as well here because we knew a little bit more about him. I don't know. Another example, salsa has replaced ketchup as the country's favorite condiment. It's easier to say too, salsa, 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 just rolls off the tongue. See, salsa is a great example of how, I'll use Mexicans as an example. We love their food, but according to the president, we don't like them. Well, moving on. Are you ready? This is going to be the exam. Wake up, wake up, wake up. You need to know. This is not a drill. This is real. Bong, bong, bong. This is real. This is real. You need to know this for the exam. You need to know the 5 reasons listed in the text as to the importance of a global perspective to sociology. Geez, is that on the review sheet? Yeah, I'm reading right from it. Where can I find this in the book, Maynard? Thanks for asking. On pages 8 to 9. Okay, so could you go over those, Maynard? I would gladly go over them with you. Number 1, where we live shapes the lives we lead. For example, if you're born in Mali, for example, or Thailand, you're going to have a whole different life experience than if you're born in the United States. So where we live shapes the lives we lead. 2, societies throughout the world are increasingly interconnected. While through electronic technology, we export U.S. culture to the rest of the world, each year about 1.3 million new immigrants